So, hey everybody, and welcome to our Friday in Conversation with, the first of our Friday in Conversation with, I should say, because I have another one coming up at 3:30. But I'm particularly excited, particularly pleased that I'm having this in conversation with Anita Gray, because Anita is head of diversity and inclusion for a global organization. She's based in the UK, but her remit is, or she works within that global organization. And you know me and diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is why I'm so delighted to welcome Anita, who's going to share a little bit about her introvert story with us. She's also going to talk about, which I'm so pleased about, she's also going to talk about introversion as part of the DEI agenda, because I don't think it gets spoken about anywhere near enough. Anyway, enough from me as the outset. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to welcome Anita and just tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into some lovely, gentle conversation, Anita.
Hi, Jo. Thank you. Really happy to be here with you today and taking part this week. As you said, I work in a global organisation. My remit is in the UK for equity, diversity and inclusion. I'm a single mum with a 15-year-old son who can be quite challenging at times and also very lovable at times. And yeah, really happy to be here with you today.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Now, as I say, the reason I'm particularly interested really is because we know that the neurodiversity doesn't really kind of get caught in the DEI agenda enough. But before we go in that direction, tell us a little bit about you, about when you found out that you were an introvert and some of the challenges that you faced.
Yeah, sure, Jo. Thank you. So, well, for years, actually, I thought of myself as shy. And if ever I said that to my friends, they thought it was absolutely hilarious because they didn't see it. They couldn't see that in me at all. And when I did your survey, the survey that you offer on your website, which I highly recommend,
Thank you.
when I received that report back, it was such a revelation and a relief. It really, really helped me to understand myself better. It showed that I was sociable, open and connected.
Right.
And when I was reading it, was, oh, that's true. Yes, that's true. Yes. Oh, my goodness. So one example is the sociable aspect. I often get chatting to people in supermarket queues, which my son thinks is a bit odd, but I actually love speaking to people. And when I go to events, I often recognise those who seem to be left out in some way, and I do my best to invite them into the conversation. So I have got a skill for networking and talking to people and mixing with new people. But what I've realised is that I prefer to have it on my own terms. And I really do carefully consider invitations that I accept and ones that I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other side, that's something that's important for my role, is that I'm often prepared to discuss what people might call undiscussable or difficult topics. And that actually really helps me in my role. Yeah.
Yes. I can imagine actually that, there are such big, important topics to discuss, but you're right, often they're the undiscussables, and how do we surface those and bring them out into the fore? And I think maybe some of your natural skills and talents as an introvert, in terms of being able to really listen and being able to notice what's not being said as well, is going to be so important there.
Yes, really.
I had to have a little smile when you said about talking to people in the queues, because I think my favorite story, I do that as well on my own terms. So if somebody talks to me, it's like, well, I'm not sure I want this conversation. But if I'm in the mood, I will often initiate conversation. And I remember being in our little local post office store, and it was, I think, about 11:30 in the morning. And I was there just to do some boring shopping, I think. But there was quite a long queue, and it was before socially distancing, so we were stood relatively close together. And the man in front of me had a bunch of flowers, and the man behind me had a bottle of wine. And I remember saying, well, I think I'd rather be going home with either one of you two than I would with,
Oh.
I think I had a loaf of bread or something boring. And of course, that just got everyone laughing and sparked up a conversation. And I noticed that I'm really quite comfortable to do that when I'm in the right space to do it. And again, like you, people would say you're not introverted because they see me do that and think, well, if you're an introvert, you can't do that. So we know that both of us are busting some of the myths actually around introversion, that's for sure.
Well, that is for sure. Yes. And then you asked me about some of the challenges I've faced. So I've got a few examples. I've worked in the tech industry pretty much my whole career. It is very male dominated.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of, there's lots of research to show that. In my current company globally, we've got about 70% men and 30% women.
Yeah.
And sometimes in meetings, it can be really hard to get the space to be heard or find space to talk. It sometimes feels that one person finishes and before there's even a breath, the next person's jumped in. So I really do yearn for meetings where people will just take a pause and a breath to allow for a bit of reflection. And you've modelled that beautifully, Jo, in our conversations. It's such a treat. And then the other one is pressure to either be or be seen as being confident and having all the answers. In my appraisals, I often receive really good feedback, such as passionate, dedicated, compassionate, thought-provoking, building relationships, etc. However, in my last appraisal, two very senior men, in slightly different words, but one of them said, stop being nervous. And the other one said, start being more confident in my messages.
Right.
And I know their intentions were good and they were trying to help. I do know that because I've got good relationship with both of them. However, when I really reflected on this, it really got me thinking, and I decided that I didn't actually agree.
Right.
Because my role requires courage, not confidence. And I think I don't have all the answers. Actually, who of us does? None of us has all the answers.
Yeah.
And when I suggest actions that I think will work, it's something I'm prepared to try. It doesn't mean I've got all the answers. And I think for me, humility and being open and listening and learning are much more important leadership skills than being overly confident.
Gosh, I would agree with so much that you said there about courage being more important than confidence. And I think you're right. Doing the work you're doing, having to talk about those undiscussable things mean that you do need to have the courage of your convictions. If it's a subject you believe passionately in, and how lovely that you've received that feedback, then that gives you some kind of presence really to be able to stand there and make your proposal. And being an introvert, I'm pretty sure that you've really thought through that proposal. So by the time it's a suggested idea, you've mulled it over, you've worked it through, you've thought about the downsides, you've thought about the risks. So by the time it's presented, it's a well considered, it's not a top of the head, off the cuff idea. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I do a lot of research and really consider things carefully before I present them. Yes, that's really true. And then the final thing is being asked to present at short notice, and being sort of off the cuff presentations with 10 minutes notice or something really doesn't work for me.
No.
And that's why, Jo, I'm grateful that we've had a conversation and you gave me a bit of an outline as to what to expect today, because that really does work for me. And I've got a few notes that I've got in front of me that I can refer to know that I'm remembering everything that I wanted to say.
Yeah. And for me, that feels really important. Some people, when they come on as podcast guests, they don't worry at all about what the questions are likely to be. And other people, like you, say, is there some kind of shape to this? What questions might you ask me? And I always think that's really useful, because then we know the territory we're each going into. And I'm unlikely then to either put you at ease or take you kind of off your stride, as it were. And I think that's just human decency, actually. In these situations, we don't need, it's not like I'm trying to trip you up or test you in any way. This is about enabling us as introverts to flourish by being our true selves. So why wouldn't we do that? And how much better would meetings be if everyone came in prepared? If
Yes.
everyone actually, if we had a clear agenda and we knew what the agenda items were, and whether we were looking to make a decision or whether we were looking just to explore something. So there's so much we could do to help people and meetings run more effectively, actually. So yeah, I agree with so much that you said, Anita.
Yes, that's really true. Really is. And actually, one more's just popped into my head, which is dreading going to work events where it's a sort of all employees, or what they call a town hall.
Yes.
Where you're milling around and there's no structure. And so an admission is, in the past, I've suddenly got a headache for some of those things, or had childcare issues. I'm getting better now, but in the past I really didn't like those kind of events.
Yeah. And it'd be useful to think about how you've maybe managed to negotiate them better now, Anita, because if you don't need to have a headache anymore or childcare issues, then what made the difference? What made it more an easier situation for you to be part of?
I think it's really about if there's somebody you can go with, or somebody else, for me, it's if there's somebody I could go with, or people that I know that are going, that know that I can have a conversation with.
Yeah.
That really helps. And it's also knowing that actually that I've got something of value to speak about. When I'm talking about my subject area, I can chat away in those kind of events.
Yeah.
And so I think that really helps.
Yeah, I think that's wise advice. And I don't know if you've seen the Simon Sinek clip where he's talking about him being I think he calls himself a raging introvert. But what he says is that he goes to events with an extrovert, because then he can just stand back and listen to them talking and just nod occasionally. And it's a lovely little clip. It's only about a minute or something, but it's really just, I think it's a really worthwhile thing for introverts to watch, because look how big and successful Simon Sinek is. And yet he's quite openly saying, I'm an introvert, and those things really don't appeal to me at all. So you're not alone in not liking those things. I too have my own strategies, in that there isn't always someone I can go with, because as an independent consultant, often I'm there on my own. But what I do, I've noticed, is that I pay particular attention to the news that day. And if I'm going into London, for instance, I'll pick up the Metro or one of those kind of free papers, and just have a few things that are topics of conversation that are in the news that I can ask questions about. And my best tip is just ask questions, because you get people talking that way, and then I can sort of stand back a bit and just, rather than have to talk about me, I can actually get them talking about themselves. So it's great that we share those strategies,
Yes.
that we have our own little techniques and strategies. Yeah.
Some great tips there. Thank you, Jo. I'll take those on board as well.
Thank you for yours. So what are your thoughts on neurodiversity then, and introversion being part of the DEI agenda? Is it something that you think there is movement on already, or that we maybe should be pushing more for? What are your thoughts, Anita?
So I actually think it's a really, really important topic. And it is linked in with being valued, or valuing and embracing what makes each of us unique.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's, lots and lots of evidence now that we all have brains that work differently in different ways. And we also have different behavior. behaviours, but it doesn't actually mean that any one is better than the other at all. I've seen lots of evidence of neurodiversity being addressed in organisations, including in mine. Introversion is probably a new angle to that.
Right.
I still see it as being fairly new. And actually, if we think about the DEI agenda, it's absolutely massive. I mean, there's so many different components to consider. So if you think about it, if I think about the way I approach things, there's monitoring and analytics. So, for example, the gender pay gap report would fit into that.
Yeah.
There's policies and processes and how we can make them as unbiased as possible. The whole employee life cycle, employee networks, which have a massive role to play, clients and suppliers and how we deal with them, inclusive leadership, communications and events, and learning and development. And actually, in all of those, there's opportunity to weave understanding about introversion into every single one of those, I would suggest.
I was thinking as you were going through the list, there are so many areas, and certainly from my perspective as an L&D professional, I know that the way I interact with introverts and extroverts, or I need to be quite flexible with the way I interact to get the best out of introverts and the best out of extroverts in a training or learning and development environment. But inclusive leadership as well is so important, because I recently was on a summit. I say recently, probably a few months ago now, with Vivian Aqua over in the Netherlands. And she was running the diversity. It was diversity, equity and inclusion. And it wasn't level up. I'll remember the phrase in a moment. But it was the first time, and I don't know why, but it was the first time that I'd heard equity come in there. Because often you hear diversity and inclusion. And she was making such a valid point about the fact that it's about equitable inclusion. So, and I thought that was a really interesting point when it comes to inclusive leadership and making sure that the playing field is level for us all, actually. And I think what you're doing is so important. And if there's any way we can help as introverts, then please let us know, because it's going to be to the benefit of all organisations and the introverts who are at the moment often pretending to be something they're not in order to fit in. So it's such a big role you've got and such great work. So thank you for doing that on our behalf, as well as, all of the other areas of diversity.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I wanted to speak about the vision that I've set out at work for the work I'm doing, because I did take into account there's all these various terms. So we've got diversity, inclusion, equality, equity, and I looked at what all of those actually mean. And the vision that I've set out is to foster a culture of trust and belonging where everybody has equal opportunity and support to flourish and is respected and valued for embracing what makes them unique. And
gosh, I love that. I love that. Yeah, I'll get us to put that in the email that goes out tomorrow, because that is such a powerful vision. Who wouldn't want to work for an organisation with a vision like that?
Well, that is the vision, but with any vision, of course, there's work to do. There clearly is work to do. And actually, going back to weaving introversion into corporate companies, really, I think a key area is the whole employee life cycle. So taking different styles and preferences into account, right from attraction, what you put on your website, how you market yourself, recruitment, how assessment centres are run and what criteria are assessed in order to make decisions. Performance management is a really big one. The expectations are, and actually progression and promotion. What do you need to do to get promoted is one that we've actually been talking about at work recently. So we've had some focus groups with a number of people, different levels and different characteristics. And some of the discussion was around the fact that to get promoted in more senior levels requires a presentation.
Right.
And we had a big debate around that. You know, why do you need a presentation? And I think I would agree that in more senior roles, it is important to be able to share your ideas, present, and be able to influence to get people on board with your ideas. So presentations or some way of expressing your talents has got a part to play. But what we were doing was looking at perhaps more creative ways than a standard PowerPoint presentation.
Good.
So bearing in mind we work in the tech industry, it could be somebody talking about a white paper, something they've written, or discussing their thoughts on a white paper. Or it could be someone doing a piece of writing, other writing, and sharing that, or, you know, doing videos. There's numerous creative ways rather than a PowerPoint presentation as a means of assessing somebody's talents.
Absolutely agree. And, you know, I was watching a bit of a video today with a guy who was talking about spontaneous presentations or spontaneous speaking. I can't remember what the phrase was now. But, you know, the research still exists that says public speaking is one of the most feared things, and not just from introverts, actually, from a lot of people. So potentially you're not getting the best out of probably 70-80% of the people who apply by only going that PowerPoint route. So, yeah, good. I love the creativity of that.
Yes, thank you. I think that is key in all of this, in the whole DEI agenda, about, you know, exploring different ideas and being open to new ideas as well.
Yeah, and you know, I talk about it when I'm working in organisations as having to rattle a few cages, and I think it is about breaking down some barriers, rattling some cages, and shaking people out of their slumber of the way things have always been done. You know, let's catch up and think about new, different ways of doing things that are really going to make sense. I noticed we've got a few people watching. If you want to write a comment or ask a question, feel free to use the comment box, and if we can respond, we will. If not, they'll be stored for later on. So feel free to do that. And if you're watching on replay at some stage, hashtag replay when you're watching, and that'll be great as well. So you've got a busy agenda to work to there, Anita, that's for sure, haven't you?
Yes, there is a lot to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. And do you have an ideal time scale in mind as to when, you know, that vision of yours is so powerful? Do you have an idea of when that vision could be a reality for your organization?
Gosh, I think it's lots of small steps along the way. You know, this kind of work isn't, it's not a quick kind of piece of work to do. Gosh, there was an organisation the other day who had got really good balance in their gender side of things, and it had taken them 10 years to get to that through a lot of effort. Gosh, I can't remember the name of the organisation right now, but it was, you know, through accountability, senior leadership, people working together, as you said, Jo, challenging the status quo. But I think it's good to aim for milestones along the way, but it's not a quick thing to do, this changing cultures. It really isn't.
No, absolutely agree. When I did my master's in change agent skills and strategies, one of the things we looked at was, you know, how you create and embed organizational change. And the danger, of course, if you don't get everyone on board of it slipping back to the way it was, is ever present. So not only is it not quick, it takes effort to keep it where you need it to be as well. So yeah, completely understand that. Completely.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So we're obviously having this conversation as part of what in the US is National Introvert Week, which we've piggybacked on and are fondly referring to as International Introvert Week. So what does it mean to you, Anita, to have a week kind of that puts the spotlight on us in some ways? Because we know we have our World Introvert Day on January the 2nd, but a whole week is, you know, something different. So what does it mean to you for us to have this week where we can start maybe to to step up and show ourselves a bit more? What does it mean to you?
Well, I think it's brilliant for a start. I think I'm really delighted to be taking part in this with you, Jo, and your other guests. I've listened to some of the other materials you've shared this week, which I'd highly recommend. And I think it's, we're with you, it's being trailblazers to bring this whole concept and idea to the UK. It feels a real luxury to have a whole week of events. And I think, it's really showing a massive opportunity to, I'd love to, help influence and work with you and others to get this to be part of the EDI calendar. So, for example, CIPD, Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, they've got a calendar they produce every year of all the possible things that you could celebrate.
Yes.
And I'd love to see National Introverts Week being added onto that for companies to consider as part of their planning.
I think that would be amazing. Do you know how we go about that, Anita? That would be fantastic.
I don't know offhand, but I think the more events like this and the more of us spreading the word, will help.
And a bit of a lobby, perhaps, to the CIPD to get it on their calendar. So a few members and fellows who are introverts to put a word in, perhaps.
Yes, there may be some listening to this right now. Who knows?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, if you are, here's your call to action. Let's get this on the CIPD calendar for next year, for 2022.
That would be amazing. That would be really cool.
Brilliant.
Yes. And I think I had a few other points, Jo, if I may.
Yes, of course.
One thing that's occurred to me as part of preparing for this is the how in your report that I got back, it speaks about the richness of one's inner world. And that, when I really reflected on that, I realized actually this rich, my own inner world, the richness of it is really helping me in my role. Because I've realized I am a sponge for new ideas, and I love doing research, quietly researching. I love nothing more than listening to TED Talks and podcasts, reading articles, and that really enables me to, in my work, to have the depth that's needed. It's not, as you said before, it's not just a quick, this idea came into my head. It's more about having the depth that's needed.
Yes, and I think many of the introverts watching and listening to this will recognize that rich inner world, and it's a place I love to retreat to, which is why I don't think I could ever be lonely, because it's not lonely in my rich inner world, that's for sure.
Yes, I think I love being on my own. I don't feel lonely at all when I'm on my own. I relish the time. It feels like a real luxury.
Yeah, it does for me too. Any other points that you had there, Anita?
I think I've probably covered most of the points. Apart from to say that I'm very grateful, Jo, to the opportunity to join you today. And I think there's work to do. And as I said, I would really be happy to support you and others involved in spreading the word more about introversion.
Yeah, thank you. Because the people who are around this community a fair bit will know just how passionate I am about tackling the extroversion bias in business and in education. And I think actually it starts in education, because then it ceases to become quite such a problem in business. So to have people like you who are, experts in your own right, who are champions in your organization, who head up something as important as this on the same page is incredibly important and actually both reassuring and encouraging for me, Anita. So thank you. It gives me hope and spirit to keep on. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jo. Equally, I very much value the work you're doing, and very grateful that you're doing this amazing work to spread the word. So thank you, Jo.
Thank you. Oh, Toboko has just commented on our session. So thank you. Oh, empathetic leadership. Yeah. but inclusive leadership. Yeah, and I think there's an element to Boko of those definitely being aligned and maybe being the same thing, because if we bring our emotional intelligence and our empathy into the leadership arena, along with other things that Anita mentioned, like humility, it's going to be a much better leadership team that we're looking at, and more likely to have followers who want to follow for the right reasons rather than who follow out of fear. So thank you for that comment, Toboko. Really, really appreciate that. And it's lovely to know you're here with us. So Anita, any final words? We're coming up on time, I think. So anything you'd like to leave us with? Maybe a piece of advice for introverts, perhaps newly on their flourishing journey. Is there anything you'd like to leave them with?
Yes, there is a quote that I've often used throughout the years. I studied German at university many years ago, and it's not German, not in German, but I think it's attributed to Nietzsche. But the quote is, "Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it."
Oh,
and yes. That quote has really served me well, because sometimes when I've sort of thought, oh, I don't want to do this, or I'm not sure, that quote has come to me and it's spurred me on. And I love the genius, power, and especially the magic side. That sometimes once you start doing things you feel a little bit out of your comfort zone, that enables you to grow, and then other opportunities come along. So that's a quote that I love.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I shall put both your vision and that quote in tomorrow's newsletter with this link again for those who didn't manage to catch us today, Anita. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for waving our flag in the diversity, equity and inclusion arena. And I look forward to working with you and talking with you on an ongoing basis. So thank you for being my guest today, Anita.
Thank you very much, Jo. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.